So welcome back, and we're now going to dive into session 2 of my Cloud Control Center, if you like, overview and training videos. So what have we done already in session 1? And hopefully you've had the opportunity to take a look at that. In session 1, we deployed the Cloud Control Center. We have also gone through the process of installing the System Landscape Directory, or SLD, agents on a number of the different machines. So far we've deployed our HANA server. We've put on the HANA server, we've put the SLD agent and the backup service. And then we've deployed 2 other Linux boxes. Okay, Linux A that just has the license server, and Linux B that has all of the other components, the analytics service, the job service, the service layer, and all those other components of SAP Business One version for HANA. And you recall that there was a specific reason why we separated those out and didn't just put them all on the same box running HANA. And you'll recall that was because we wanted to keep our HANA server dedicated for running all of the processes related to managing the HANA database and managing the data that is stored on that database effectively. And we also wanted to be in a situation where we would be able to restart potentially the other services and the server that they were running on without potentially affecting either the license server or the HANA server. So we've gone through that process. Now already I've had a couple of people ask me, well, Richard, you've told us that we need to run these other Linux servers, but how should we size those Linux servers? How many cores should we have? How much RAM should we allocate? So for the license server, so this is the Linux box that's purely running the license server. You need 2 cores and between 4 to 8 gigabytes of RAM. All right, and it depends on the workload that the machine is under. So you could start with 2 cores and 4 gig of RAM, and then just keep an eye on it and see how, from your monitoring reports, your RAM is being used. Is it really starting to get up beyond the 60 to 70% utilization? If it is, then go to 8 gig of RAM. All right, so the key to running any cloud environment effectively is to have good monitoring and maintenance to make sure that you've got a really good understanding of what the workloads are and whether or not you've over-provisioned or under-provisioned your environment for those workloads. So again, this is part of the big advantage of virtualization, is that it gives you that ability to to adapt and adjust, assuming of course that you've got good sized hardware that's running your virtual servers, which of course you should have. So then the second Linux box, this was the one that's running all of the other services, the analytics services, the service layer, and so on. Well, on that machine, you should have at least 4 cores and between 8 and 16 gig of RAM allocated. All right, so that's a little bit of additional information there on those pieces. So then the next area that we want to allocate in our Cloud Control Center, we've done our license servers, we've got our database instances have been set up, and we have all of our other HANA components, and I did all of those together so we would get all of the Linux components done all in one hit. Okay, the next thing you want to do is you want to go and you want to map out your storage. Now the thing I really like about the Cloud Control Center and the way it's designed is, if you look at this, you'll actually see across the top here all the different areas where you need to configure storage. Okay, so you need shared folders, and that's typically something that is a standard part of SAP Business One. You want tenant storage, and these are folders that are dedicated to a specific tenant. You want user storage, and as the name would suggest, these are the folders where the individual users can access and store their specific data. You then have your implementation repositories, We'll talk a little bit more about implementation repositories because this is where you can store your solution package of files, and you can also store other files. Your company templates repository, same kind of scenario, but you'll see more specifically when we start getting in there and start doing things like deploying clients. You'll start seeing how the implementation and the company template repositories kick in. And then, of course, you have your software repositories. Now, I actually think the most important one here in the context of what we've already talked about is the software repositories. Because remember, the whole way through session 1, I made the point to you that you don't need to install the SAP Business One server, right? And that is the piece that deploys the SBO Common, your demo databases, all of those components, deploys the client, creates the B1 share folder, and everything like that. For those of you who are familiar with Business One, you'll know how critical those components are. Well, the Cloud Control Center takes care of all of that, but it does that because it has a full deployment image of all of the files that are required for each version of SAP Business One, and those get stored in the software repositories. So what that means is that for every version of Business One that you are going to be hosting for your clients using the Business One Cloud Control Center, you need to have an entry in your software repositories, and you'll see this in a second, because what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put together a couple of tenants. I'm going to put together a HANA tenant, which is going to be running Business One 9.2 patch level 8. I'm going to put on a SQL-based service unit, not tenant, SQL-based service unit, and that service unit is going to be running Business One 9.2 patch level 8. But then I'm also going to deploy, for the sake of the exercise, a SQL Server-based service unit, but that's going to have SAP Business One 9.2 patch level 7. And that will give you a good understanding of how all these pieces tie together. So what you first have to do is you have to decide whereabouts inside your organization are you going to create these file shares, because that's effectively what these are. These are the areas where you're mapping your file shares. Okay, so you might decide you're going to put those on a Windows server that is also running, for example, as a domain controller, either like a backup domain controller or a primary domain controller. You might decide you're going to put it on a dedicated server that is just looking after your file storage. All right, wherever you decide to put it, remember, you want to make sure that that server actually has the SLD agent installed onto it as well, so that the Cloud Control Center can communicate with that server. Okay, so I've already gone ahead and I've done that in my environment, and I've actually created some folders for these. So if I go in here into my software repositories, in order to map those folders after you've created them, so step 1 is create the folders and share them out to the administrator. Make sure your B1C admin has access, or whatever the case may be. You come in here and you go register. So now you need to fill in the path where those files are located. So in my particular instance, it's on a server //SMB PDC, and then it's in a subfolder called Cloud Control Center Storage. It's in a further subfolder called, funnily enough, Software Repositories. Now, that's not enough, because remember, you have to map each different version. So what you're going to find inside each version of SAP Business One, there is a file in the root directory of the installation image called info.txt. And inside that info.txt, it actually has the build number. So what I like to do is actually then use my build number as the next level down in the folder structure. Whatever you do, you can call it anything you want. I just choose to use the build numbers because that's what I was taught originally back in 2013. But the most important thing that you need to do is make sure that the underlying structure of that folder is very specific. And sitting underneath that, you need to have a folder called Upgrade CD with no spaces. And then sitting underneath that is where your installation image is. So let's just go and quickly have a look at that, because I've got my folders here. All of my folders have already been created. You'll see them all sitting here ready and waiting. So if I go in here into my software repositories, okay, you'll see I've put them into another folder called SBO packages. All right. And sitting underneath SBO packages, you'll see I have all these different builds. Now, don't worry about this one. I've got a Business One 9.3 build here, but Business One 9.3 is not currently supported by the Cloud Control Center because, of course, it's an early adopter mode at the moment. All right, so these are my my folders. All right, so all I need to do, and let's go and take a look, for example, because I'm going to register my SQL one, and you'll see I've put 180S indicating it's SQL, and this one's 180H indicating it's HANA. I'll go and register this one first. Okay, so 180H. So I'm going to go into that one. Now, you'll see sitting underneath there, I've got my Upgrade CD folder. Let's go in and take a look at that, and you'll notice that this is exactly what you have when you unpack your installation CD. And here's our info.txt, and you'll see there is my build number. All right, so this file, SAP Business One Cloud Control Center, is going to read the contents of this file, and it will use that to determine which version you're actually putting in this repository. Okay, so if I go back up one level, because I'm going to cheat here, right, what I can do is I can go here and I can just copy that entire path, come back here, and I can go here and paste that. So just do a Control V, and then I come here and I say register, and you'll see that is registered. It's very, very quick. And now if you see up the top, you'll see that that version number, there it is, 920.180.08. It's picked up that it's HANA. Okay, I'm now going to go and do the next one. Let's do a Control V again. And except I'm just going to replace the H with an S because this is a SQL server. I'm going to register this one. That's now done. And there you go. You'll see same version number, but different database type. All right, let's go one more. And paste that in, but remember, this one is patch level 7, so it's going to be 170, and I'll register that. And that's now done, and there it is. That software repository is now registered into my Cloud Control Center. So then I could cheat a little bit more if I wanted to. Okay, so I've got all of my software repositories installed. So the next thing I might want to do is my company template repositories. So again, I can go here and register. I can put in my path, Command V. Again, I keep doing that, Control V. And then I'll just remove these components. And what I like to do is make sure that the names actually match. The names of the folders that I'm using actually match the name in the Cloud Control Center. So remember, this is now my company template repositories. And now I can register that. And that's now done. And so I'll say close. Then I go to my implementation repositories. Same scenario, register. I'll paste that again. backspace that out and replace this with, you guessed it, implementation repositories. Alright, and we'll register that. That one's now done. Then we've got our user storage. Same scenario here. Going to paste that in. I'll go back, and instead of it being software repositories now, it will be user storage. And we'll register that. Then I'll have my tenant storage. This can be a little bit tedious, but I think it's important that I show you each of these steps. So, if you're just doing this, maybe you've got the video running on another machine and you're following along, which, by the way, I recommend is the best way to use these videos. It's good that I cover each one of these sections, and that way you actually don't miss any of the steps. Okay, so again, let's paste that in there. But remember, the key thing with these storage areas is that you've already set them up on your server. All right, so CCC storage, and this is going to be tenant storage. And then I'll say register, and that's now done. And then just close that. And then I go to my shared folders and I'll register this. Alright, so that's CCC storage, and this is now going to be shared folders. Alright, so we'll register that. Alright, it's telling me my path does not exist. So let's go and double check what's gone wrong here. So let's go back up to my CCC storage. Alright, so I've actually called it shared folder. So let's just go and rename this. And that's now called shared folders. And we'll try and register that again. And now you'll see the path exists, so we're all good. So that's it. That's all of my storage areas are now mapped out. So the next step is you want to go and configure all of your presentation servers. So I've already done that. I've already built all of my presentation servers, and my presentation servers are named RDS-host, and I've got 6 of them. So I just use an alpha character. So I've got RDS host A through to RDS host F. All right, so they're all of my presentation servers. Now the configuration of your presentation servers, which are where your SAP Business One application is going to run, and you're going to host those and feed them up to your customers. The configuration of those is purely a Windows task. So creating them, setting up remote desktop services, putting them in to a remote desktop services farm, configuring your gateway, configuring your connection broker, all of those different components are the standard Windows steps that you will need to take. Now I'm assuming that you know how to do that, but again, same scenario here. If you are learning all this for the very first time, just drop me a note and I will put together a video training session and actually run through that entire process as well. But as I said, I've already done this. I've already configured those machines. So what I can do now is I can come here to presentation servers and I can simply register them. So I go in here and I give it a name. So I'm going to pick my first one, RDS host A. And you then specify whether or not it's running remote desktop services, Citrix, or some kind of unknown presentation layer. All right, I always use RDS, and then you come in here and you'll click on a drop down list, and it will show you a list of all of those servers. Now if you come in here, and I've done this on purpose, if you come in here and you get nothing in this list, that's because you have not yet installed the SLD agent onto your remote desktop servers. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and we're going to register our SLD agent on those servers. And it's the same process that we do with Linux. We just need to run the installer. I'll do it on the first one, and then I'll just go ahead and do the rest of them. I won't show you multiple times, and then we'll come back here and register them. Okay? So in order to do that, first thing I want to do is I'm going to go and connect to the first one of those machines. And so I'm going to right click here and I'm going to choose run, and I'm going to run Microsoft Terminal Services Connection, the MSTSC, and I'm going to put /admin because that connects me to, if you like, the console session, so the main administrative session on that server. And then I'll say OK. And now it brings up my remote desktop connection, and I'll put in RDS-host-A, and then I'm going to connect to this machine, and I'll just say yes to that security message. And now it's bringing me into this machine. It's going to ask me to log in, so again I'm going to log in as SMB Solutions /administrator. Okay, and what I'm going to do, important point to note, because these are remote desktop servers, if you are going to log on as the administrator in a domain environment, you do need to specify the domain name there in the username dialog box. I put in my password and hit enter, and you'll see it goes ahead, runs my my roaming profiles, sets up my folder redirection and everything like that. Give this a couple of seconds for that host to come up. Now I've cheated a little bit. On these machines you'll see I've actually been using them before, so the Business One clients are already installed. But you'll see what will happen when we add these into a service unit. The Cloud Control Center is going to go and revalidate that, and it's going to go and reinstall that client for me anyway. So just thought I'd point that out just in case you see this and you go, oh, he's already got Business One on there. Why is that? Okay, so we'll go up and we'll open up a File Explorer or a Windows Explorer. Call it what you will. Go into our downloads, into our B1 Cloud patch level 8. Now this time, instead of going into the Linux folder, which I did on my Linux boxes, I'm just going to come in here into my SLD agent MSI. Alright, and you'll see that there is actually a Windows installer, so that makes it very, very easy to create Active Directory policy and push this out to all of your machines, all of your Windows machines through Active Directory. Okay, but I'm just going to run this one. And you'll see it's pretty much the same process as we went through with Linux, except of course it's a Windows machine, so everything looks a little bit different. So I'm going to install it into that folder. Again, it's asking me the same thing, the operator name that we're going to register this service with, because it is going to run as a Windows service. So as you know, Windows services need to execute in a security context in Windows. So again, just going through exactly the same process that we did on Linux. So that's all good. And what it's doing now, again, I cheated because I'd used these terminal servers or these remote desktop servers before. So these parameters were actually already stored in an ini file. So it's automatically picked it up. But that just makes my life a little bit easier. And you'll see it's exactly the same path except instead of putting sld0100.svc, I've just got sld.svc. Now you can put 0100, it really doesn't matter. Either one of those will work, because what it's going to do when you say next is it's going to go ahead and it's going to validate that anyway. Alright, and we'll now say install. We'll let that installation run. And again, now that that is completed, it's just giving you a reminder, hey, if you are going to be deploying this remote desktop server and you're going to be using HANA, then make sure that you've installed the SAP HANA client on this machine. Okay, so that's now done. I then say finish. That's complete. And of course now, if I go back to my Cloud Control Center, I'm going to close that down now. If I look at my SLD agents, you'll now see there it is, RDS host A. So it's now recognized that I've installed the SLD agent on that machine. And if I go up here to presentation servers now and go to register that, again, go through that process, RDS/host A. The type is RDS. And now when I click on the server list, there you can see there is my RDS host A server. Now, I always like to use 64-bit clients, so again, I can specify here that that's what I want to use on this machine, a 64-bit client. Okay, so then I'll say register. Now it's talking through the SLD agent, it's checking that machine, and you'll see it's actually detected that I already have an SAP Business One client loaded on that machine. So if I say close, you can see there it is, 64-bit client. The SBO client version is 920.180.08 and it's Microsoft SQL Server. So that's fairly easy and fairly straightforward. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to reinstall the I'm going to reinstall the SLD agent on all those other RDS machines, and I'm then going to go ahead and register them using the same process. So when we come back from doing that, you're going to see that this list is fully populated with all those machines. Okay, talk to you in a second. Okay, so now that's done, let's go in and take a look at our presentation servers, and you'll now see that I have all of my presentation servers registered, and right now I have 2, 4, 6, 7 presentation servers. And if I go here and I sort them by SBO client version, you can see that I have a number of them that are working with Business One 9.2 patch level 8. I actually do have a presentation server that's got 9.2 patch level 7. And I've got one presentation server that's already loaded up with 9.3. All right, and then of course I can go across here and I can sort these by client type as well. And you can see the area that I'm going to focus on right now is SAP HANA. And right now I have 3 presentation servers available for me with SAP HANA clients loaded. And right now they also have SAP Business One 9.2 patch level 8 loaded on them as well. So they're the ones I'm going to work with. And so what we'll do right now is we will go ahead and we will create our first service unit. Now there's still some additional components that need to be created, but I am going to cover those in a later session because there are some additional things that you need to be aware of. And some of those things are outside the scope of issues or outside the scope of the Cloud Control Center, let's say. And that's the integration components and the mail server, but we will cover those separately. But for now, we're going to go into our service units and we're going to create a new service unit. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to click on New. And it's basically saying, all right, in order for us to create a new service unit, this is what we need. We need a database instance. We need common database, shared folders, tenant storage, software repositories, license server, presentation servers, and integration components. Now, you don't necessarily have to have all of these components available. So let's go ahead and you'll see exactly what I mean. So I'm going to go and say next. And so I'm going to give this service unit a name of service unit A. So we'll go ahead and type that in, service unit A. And this is going to be running SAP HANA. Now, as soon as you make some of these selections, it then narrows down the choices that you can make underneath. So right now, the system knows I've only got a 9.2 patch level 8 software repository available. So I go and choose that. And then I can come in here and I can say, all right, what is the purpose of this service unit? So for now, I'm going to flag this as being available as a testing service unit. And then I'll say next. Now it's going to ask me to choose all of these components, but only the components at the top are required. Now, so I'm going to choose my Linux A license server. I'm choosing my HANA database instance. The system is going to create a new SBO common for me. And then I'm going to choose my shared folder. There it is, shared folders. I'm going to choose my tenant storage, and there it is, there's my tenant storage. And that's now the process taken care of. So the next thing I'm going to do is I can go down here and I can add some of these additional components. So I'm going to select my job service, my implementation repository, my analytics service, my app framework, my service layer, my mobile service, and of course my company template repositories, because I'm going to use all of those as part of this this service unit. All right. The only thing I'm missing right now is my integration component, or B1I. And that's fine. I'm okay with that. So then we go in here and we'll say next. So now it's going to ask me, all right, which presentation servers do you want to utilize? So remember, I said I'm going to use B, C, and G. All right, because they were the ones that actually already have all the HANA components, the HANA clients and everything on them. Then I'll say next. Now it will ask me, do I want to create new browser access servers? Right, so this is for the web client. For now, I'm not going to have browser access available. I'm just going to focus on remote desktop server access. We'll cover off on what we need to do for browser access service in another session. So I'll then say next, and now it's asking me for the credentials that are going to be needed in order for me to do the installation of those components on these remote desktop servers. All right, so again, I'm going to use my administrator. And in your instance, again, remember you could have set up your B1C admin. So in that case, if that's what you've done, you will use that. And then we'll say next. And now it's confirming everything that's going to happen here. And then when we say next, it's going to go ahead and start those processes. So let's trigger that. And away it goes. It's now creating that service unit. And so that service unit creation was taking quite a bit of time. And so what I was able to do, I was able to just close it down by clicking on the X up in the top right hand corner. Now you can do that and the process will still continue running in the background. So for example, you'll see that I don't have a service unit here yet. All right, so I might be thinking, well, what's going on? So one of the areas I want to go and look at is the creation of the common database. So go here to common databases and you can see that the SBO common on my HANA server is actually still being created. So you've got a little progress indicator which is running here. So when you have these tasks, and remember the SLD agent is the component that's responsible for managing and processing these tasks. When the SLD agent is firing off and it's running this task, it will constantly be coming back here and keeping you updated on exactly what's happening as part of that. And then what you'll also see with my presentation servers is you'll see that my presentation servers are actually waiting for the tasks to kick off to make sure that I have exactly the right version of SAP Business One installed on those presentation servers. So we're going to let all of those tasks continue, and we're going to keep monitoring the service unit to see when that service unit comes back up online. And of course, the thing to bear in mind is at any particular point in time, you're able to come down here under your system configuration and you can see your audit logs. So you can see everything that's going on inside the system. You can see the tasks that are being run and so on and so forth. So you've got a full list of all of those tasks, and you can see here we have our latest task which we just kicked off around about 3 minutes ago. Okay, so bear that in mind. You can always come back and take a look at those audit logs. So we'll come back here to our service units, and we're just going to wait. Give it a little bit more time, and those tasks will complete and this service unit will be created. Okay, so when we come back and take a look, you'll see that our service unit has now been created successfully. There is a monitoring message here. We'll take a look at that in a second. If we look at our common databases, there it is. Our SBO common's been created on our HANA database server. And if we look at our presentation servers, they are now all showing that the clients are up to date and everything is ready to go. But you might be concerned about this little warning message here on the service unit. So if you hover over that, it'll actually give you a quick overview of all the status. So you can see what's happening here is that there is not a license file available on this licensing server. So what you need to do, of course, is you need to go into your licensing server, and here it is. Here's our Linux licensing server. And you need to go to your configuration, you'll grab your hardware key, and of course, you will then go ahead and generate a license key. Alright, so I'm going to go and do that, and I'm going to bring a license key in that we can then use, and I'll show you how we do that. One thing I do want to do is I want to grab my hardware key so that when I am on the SAP licensing portal and I go to create that license file, I've definitely got the right hardware key. So I've now generated my license file and I want to bring it into the system. So how do I do that? I come up here to license files and I go in here and I say I want to import a license file. I go out and I choose my file, so it will open up a Windows Explorer window for me. I go to where I've downloaded that license file to, and I know that this is the one that I want to use, and I select that license file and then I choose import, and I'm going to overwrite the existing license file that was there before. And now if I go up here and I choose refresh, you'll now see that I have my license file that's now sitting on my Linux server. So if I now come back here to my service unit, you'll see it's still showing that the license file is not available on this server, but if I do a refresh, you'll see that that now gets updated and everything is good to go with this particular service unit. Okay, so we're now ready to rock and roll. So the next step is I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to create my very first customer. So as it turns out, I'm actually doing some work to help another SAP Business One partner, and I am deploying a demo environment for them. And so I'm going to use that specific example of how we're going to do that. Okay. So I'll go in here into customers. I'm going to create a new customer. So we're going to go in and we're going to create a new customer. So I'll go in here and say new, and then I'll say next. And I'm going to create a customer, and I'm going to create this customer and base it on my own organization. So in this case, it's SMB Solutions. And then the contact person, of course, is Richard Duffy. That's me. The phone number that I'm going to use for this, just need to double check it, 442059. Okay, 1300 442059. And then the email address is richard@smbsolutions.com.au. So the great thing about this is it really gives you the ability to get a record of the key details that relate to a customer. Now, no doubt you've got your own separate environment, your own separate system. Hopefully it's SAP Business One that you're using to manage all of your customer information. But this just gives you that quick, ready reckoner for this information. And so I'm in Australia, and my location is Noosa Heads in Queensland. My industry is software, and that's it. I'll then say next. All right, now it's just double checking the format, and it's saying my format is invalid. And let's just go in here, and that's because, if I'm not mistaken, I think this field doesn't actually like the spaces that I have in there. So we'll just get rid of those spaces, and then we'll say next. Okay, perfect. And that's now working. So then the next question it's going to ask me is, all right, do you have an existing license file for this organization? So let's say, for example, you are hosting a customer and they've already got their Business One licenses. So they're bringing their own licenses with them. Well, they'll generate a license file for you tied to that key of the license server that you're going to use, and then you can bring it in here and match it to that customer. Or what you can do is you can go in here and you can say, all right, well, here is an existing license key that I have, and I'm going to use this license key. Or of course you can say this is going to be a trial, and then you can click the trial option and it will give you your 30-day trial access to SAP Business One. So I'll say next. Now the next thing is going to ask me, it's going to say, okay, let's create some system users in the application. But you don't have to do this. You can actually skip over this for now. And when you're adding your tenants and so on, you can add those system users. But for now, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say, yes, I'm going to add a system user. And I'm going to use the user called Richard. And then I can check the name. Now it checks to see if that user exists in the domain, and it does. But if I was creating a new user, that user would not exist in the domain, so it will give me the option to go ahead and create that user. You'll see that a little later on when we do that. So then I'll say add, and then I'll say next. And then it gives me the option here to add a tenant. Okay, so for now, I'm not actually going to add a tenant. I'm going to do that separately. So I'll just say next, and that's all good, and next, and now the system's going ahead and it's creating that customer. So now that we've created that customer, the next step is to create a tenant. Now I can create a brand new empty tenant. So it's a SAP Business One database that is pre-configured and ready for the implementation to start. Or I have the option to register an existing tenant. So in a scenario where you're registering an existing tenant, that's where you've potentially already restored a database to your server and you're just going to bring that on for usage. And that's what I'm going to do here in this particular scenario, because I've got a database that I've already prepared and I've brought it onto my HANA server utilizing the schema import function, which you do have to use when you're restoring a database for HANA. Now, if you're doing a SQL Server scenario, what you can do here is when you choose a new tenant, you can go in here and you can say, all right, well, I'm going to create that tenant from a backup. And then when you say next, it'll actually ask you for the information about that customer. And then it's going to ask you for the SQL service unit that you're going to restore to. And then it's going to go into the repository where you've got your SQL backup stored that the customer has given you, and then you can bring that in through the Cloud Control Center. That's on SQL Server. Remember, with HANA, you have to do a schema import and do all that prep work yourself from the HANA Studio before you can register that tenant. But that's already been done now, so I'm going to go here and I'm going to say I'm going to register my tenant, and I'll say next. It asks me which customer do I want to register or create the tenant, so it's SMB Solutions. And then I'll say next. It's going to ask me which of my service units, and right now I've only got one, so that's an easy one to decide on. I'll then say next. Now, what it's then doing is it's looking at that particular database server, that HANA server, and it's saying, all right, well, I can see there are 4 different companies available here for you to choose from. So in this particular instance, I'm actually going to set up a database that I've created for a partner in Thailand that I'm helping out with some demos. So I'm going to get that set up for them. I've created that database, and there it is. And the tenant name, well, right now it's OEC Computers UK, but I'm going to change this, and this will be Actran Thailand. Makes it easy for me to identify that tenant. What's the purpose? Well, for them, they're going to be using this for demo purposes. And then I'll say next. Now, the next step is for me to assign users and licenses. So I'm going to go in here and say I'm going to assign a user. So I've already got a couple of users, a couple of customer users that are created. So I've got Richard and Sophie. I'm going to create both of these users as power users. And then I've got my operator of administrator. And remember, this is a super user. So I'm going to go in here, and that's going to have the user code, mapping that to the user code in Business One of manager, and mapping that as a super user. And then I'll say save. And that's now done. And so now I'm going to assign my licenses. So I'm going to give Richard a professional user license. I'm going to give Sophie a professional user license. And I'm going to give the manager a professional user license. All right. And then I'll say next and next. And now all of those changes are being processed. The system's creating that tenant from the existing database. It's allocating the licenses to that tenant and to those users, and getting everything ready so that company is now ready to be used, and those users can basically now log on and start using SAP Business One. So I'll say finish, and you'll now see there it is, my tenant's registered. And you'll see that I've used the licenses that I allocated against those users, and they're basically now ready to go. Now let's say, for example, that tenant was a database that had been given to you by a customer that was already running SAP Business One. So that database is going to have a whole bunch of users already created in the system, and you need to bring those into your cloud environment. Well, there's a process for doing that. When I go in here and I say finish, what you'll see here when I've got my customer selected, I can come in here to my user management, and I can come in and I can say, all right, I want to import users. What it will then do is it now goes into the system and it finds all the usernames that are in the database, and then it gives you the option to select that you want to bring that user in and you want to flag them against one of these roles, and you also potentially want to create a new user for them. So what have we done? We've gone ahead and we've created our service unit, we've created a customer, and we've registered a tenant from a backup. So I look forward to seeing you in our next session. Talk to you again soon.